Carrie Chapman Catt explained to her followers that her dedication to the women's suffrage movement began at a young age, when she was outraged to learn that her father and brothers could vote, but her mother could not. This revelation galvanized her determination to work for the enfranchisement of women. In 1900, after 2 decades of commitment to the cause, she was elected to succeed Susan B. Anthony as president of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. In 1902, aware that the enfranchisement of women was a global issue, Catt founded the International Women's Suffrage Alliance and traveled and lectured extensively as its president. On June 15, 1908, she presented her presidential address at the Alliance's Congress in Amsterdam.
It is a suggestive coincidence that the opening day of this Congress commemorates the anniversary of the signing of the immortal Magna Carta. That event stands out distinctly against the background of 7 centuries as one of the most important in the history of man. The historian Green says of it, "The Great Charter marks the transition from the age of traditional rights to the age of written legislation, of parliaments, of statutes." It pointed us certainly to the will of the majority behind the statutes. It pointed to the coming of votes for men and women. The blessing of the new era, inaugurated by this remarkable document, were not enjoyed by England alone, but have been shared as a common possession by all nations of the world. The Magna Carta, therefore, properly becomes the inheritance of mankind. And on June 15th, appropriately, an International Memorial Day. So sweeping have been the changes which have taken place since the signing of the Charter that the age of the English barons bears little resemblance to our own. Yet, the political evolution is not yet complete. What celebration of the day could be more fitting than the opening of a Congress which declares for the final step in that evolution? We also may make it a day of rejoicing, for at no time since the movement of the enfranchisement for women began have its advocates had so much cause for self-congratulations as now. The International Women's Suffrage Alliance met in Copenhagen 22 months ago. And in the brief time which has elapsed since then, the progress of our cause has been so rapid, the gains so substantial, the assurance of coming victory so certain, that we may imagine the noble and brave pioneers of women's suffrage, the men and women who were the torchbearers of our movement, gathering today in some far-off celestial sphere and singing together a glad paean of exultation. First, the world joined in loudly expressed disgust at the alleged unfeminine conduct of the English suffragists. Editorial writers in many lands scourged the suffrage workers of their respective countries over the shoulders of the lively English militants. Time passed, comments ceased, and the world which had ridiculed watched the contest in silence, but with never an eye closed. Then came the laugh. The dispatches flashed the news to the remotest corners of the globe that English cabinet ministers were protected in the street by bodyguards. The houses of cabinet ministers were protected by relays of police. And even the great houses of parliament were protected by a powerful cadre of police. Protected? And from what? The embarrassing attack of unarmed women? The vision of the Premier of England hiding behind locked doors and skulking along side streets and guarded everywhere by officers, lest an encounter with a feminine interrogation point should put him to rout. It proved too much for the ordinary sense of humor. Again, the dispatches presented another view. Behold, all the elaborate precaution to save members of Parliament from inopportune tidings that women should have the vote. Yet despite it all, the forbidden message is delivered. For over the houses floats conspicuously and defiantly a huge Votes for Women kite. Perhaps England did not know the big world laughed then, but it did, and more. From that moment, it conceded the victory to the suffragists. Now, I have no wish to defend or condemn the tactics which have been employed in England, but let me ask a question. Had there been newspapers and cables in 1215, do you not think the staid and dignified nobility of other lands would have been scandalized at the unruly behavior of the English barons? They certainly would. Yet we have forgotten the names of those barons, and we have forgotten the methods by which they wrested the Magna Carta from King John. We only remember that they did it, and that all mankind has enjoyed larger liberties and opportunities ever since. History repeats itself. And I venture a second prediction. For the English suffragists, final triumph is near at hand. And when it comes, the world will forget the details of the campaign it has criticized, and will only remember that women's suffrage is an established fact in one of the greatest governments of all the world. Nay more, as the English barons fought a battle for the rights of mankind in the 13th century, so do I conscientiously believe that these English women of the 20th century, suffragists and suffragettes, are striking a tremendously effective blow in behalf of the political liberty of women of all the nations. Let those who will criticize. English women are making history today, and coming generations will pronounce it nobly made. When they have won their cause, all women should understand that their proper relation to these plucky, self-sacrificing English women is not that of critic, but of debtor.